Ready to go.
Hello, entrepreneurs. So I've got an amazing guest here, Mr. Ian Berry. I met Ian a few years ago when I started my professional speaking journey, and something interesting happened. So he was having a book launch, and I went along and thought, this guy is really interesting, and he's a very experienced speaker, and I was just a young fella at the time, learning from anyone and anything. And years later, we connected through another mutual friend of ours in the speaking industry. And so I went before I connected with Ian again or reconnected with him, I went back to look at what his book was called, because I couldn't quite remember it. But I remember that it was black and it had a symbol on it. But the reason why I couldn't remember what it was called was that it doesn't have a title. So Ian, explain to us your thinking around that. How on earth did you come up with the idea to release a book without a title that's just a symbol?
Well, I wanted it to be different because the book is called Changing What's Normal.
Right.
And so I didn't want to be normal. I actually got the idea from Seth Godin, who put, I forget the name of the book, because again, it had a blank cover in his case. And that's where I got the idea from.
Right.
But I wanted to, there were two things that were going on. One was because the book's called Changing What's Normal, I wanted to do something different with the cover.
Yeah, right. Okay, cool.
And the idea came from Seth.
Why is it important for you to do something that's not normal?
Well, because I think the world is kind of going along just repeating history.
Okay, interesting.
We're doing, we've got politics at the moment that's the same as it was when I was born in the 50s.
Wow.
It hasn't changed. In fact, it's worse.
Right.
And so that, the right wing conservatives, and even on the left, I don't think right or left, neither's right.
Yep.
we need a bit of both.
Yep.
But we've got this either or stuff going. I mean, one of the writers, I think it was in Good to Great, he called it the tyranny of either or. It might have been in actually the book before that, Built to Last.
Yep. Jim Collins.
Jim Collins.
Yep.
And I see that now more than ever. It's either or, liberal or Labor, black or white, male or female, Muslim or Christian, on and on and on. And it isn't the way forward.
What have you seen the technology that sort of supported that bipartisan view? Like, do you know about the algorithms that are actually driving that?
Look, I'm not knowledgeable about them, but I do know, because I think this is what's going on, you have a conversation with someone and you mention something, and next thing you get a Facebook thing,
Yeah.
And it's obviously, they're trying to manipulate us.
Yeah, and it's only come into recent light just how damaging that's been. So the story is that the Google search engines, the Facebook algorithms and all that, they only give you what they think you want to see. So if you start Googling, a lot of certain topics, you'll only ever be presented with that. So, and how that's extrapolated out beyond that is that if you have a certain view or opinion, you'll only ever get information and content that supports that, because the algorithm thinks, this person is like this, they might prefer content like this, and they'll give us the like. So that's why the reason in recent times we've seen such a split in the views, and now more than ever, the world is so black and white. And you touched upon that earlier when you said, the things have gotten worse since you were on the planet,
Yeah, and so I see what you're saying as increasing the polarization.
Bingo.
Rather than coming together. It's like, my wife and I, we often talk about this, the world's about competition. The future's about collaboration. This, and I've been, teaching this and helping my clients with this for a very long time. Because my thought, and one of the chapters in the Change What's Normal book, it says compete with yourself.
Yeah, right.
And then find a way to collaborate with everyone else, because you know this, the only competitor I've got to worry about is the bloke I looked at in the mirror this morning.
Yeah.
I don't need to worry about anyone else.
Exactly right.
because like you, I'm unique.
Yep.
And my role, your role, and 7 billion people's role
is
to be the best version of that one-of-a-kind person that they can be.
Yeah.
So polarization doesn't help with that.
No, of course not. I also want to ask you, because you hit on an interesting point there. What does collaboration mean to you?
Well, I think, and this was one of the central ideas of the book. It's interesting because when I wrote the book, my best friend was dying.
Yeah, wow.
And I wrote most of it while he was sleeping because I took time off from work.
Yeah.
And when he was sleeping, I wrote most of the book. It was the book
Wow.
I always wanted to write.
Yep.
And I put the first draft of it, I think it was draft 24 that was the one that got published. But I had a reading group.
Right.
And one guy said to me, this idea of, chapters, or I was calling them, I think I said 58 insights to change what's normal, or something of that ilk. And he said, you need to come up with a different concept. It's change what's normal, insights is old.
Yep.
And so I started thinking about, and I played around with this, my wife and I played around with this, and eventually she drew what became my logo.
Yeah.
That is on the cover of the book. And it's called a Sparkination, which I invented.
Yeah.
And what a Sparkination is it's a spark that ignites passion that changes what's normal.
That is so profound, because you've just articulated, I think, what the world is crying out for, but we haven't really seen that evident in any of our leaders. So this might be a good way to segue into leadership. What's your opinion on leadership?
Let's just go back to collaboration. So that little piece, and so I had that logo that my wife drew. That's the Sparkination picture, and the idea is that it sparks and it flows and grows.
Yep. Huge.
And it's become the symbol that my clients, recognize. And it's interesting, before I run a workshop or do a talk, or, I often will say to people, what I say is important, but it's nowhere near as important as what you hear yourself say to yourself.
Yeah, that's so true.
And who you become and what you do. So it's not about me, it's about you.
Yeah.
And then it's about you and me.
Yeah.
And I call it shared view.
Gotcha.
Some people would call it commonunity.
Yeah.
Common unity. So imagine two circles in the either or world. One's here, one's there.
Yep.
But in the world that you and I are trying to help bring in, they're like this. They're joined together. And on one side it's your view, on the other side it's mine, but in the middle it's ours.
Yeah.
And in the ancient language, it's called a mandala.
Oh, right. Okay.
Which means the sacred piece.
Right.
Quick story. Many years ago, I'm a big fan of Carl Jung.
Okay.
And once upon a time, long ago, I happened by chance to hear Robert Johnson speak, who was a student, perhaps the most well-known protege of Carl Jung.
Right. Really?
And Robert wrote a fascinating book called Owning Your Own Shadow.
Yeah. Wow.
Which is the idea that in the dark, that's where the magic is.
Oh, that's powerful.
And on that night, he talked about how in the ancient Sanskrit language, the word for circle, meaning whole, WHOLE, is the mandala.
Right.
Which is one of the most ancient of all symbols.
Right.
If you go back to Hinduism, which is about 3,500 years old, you go back to the ancient Greeks, you go back as long as you like.
Yep.
In the very first language, which is called Sanskrit, the word is mandala, meaning whole.
Right.
And what Robert said is you put two circles together and you end up with a mandala in the middle, which is actually an Italian word that I later discovered.
Yeah.
But he said that's the bit you need. That's the sacred bit.
Yeah.
So that planted a seed in me, which led to shared view. Yours is on one side, mine's on the other, but when we're together, we're ours.
Yeah.
Hubby called it the third alternative.
Yep. Got it.
The Buddhists call it the middle path.
Yep.
And it's older than time.
It's a universal concept too, isn't it?
And so that's what I do. I help people to find shared view, which means you've got to be prepared to either let go your view and enhance someone else's, or they've got to let go theirs, or you've got to do a bit of both usually. and that takes leadership to come to the next question.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Why do you think, because we've already got that concept, or we had that concept, why do you think that concept isn't embraced much anymore? Or is it embraced and just not on a larger scale?
Well, I think the answer is quite simple. Either or is easier. It's easy to hang shit on somebody else.
Yeah.
It's easy to bash someone else's belief.
Yeah.
It's easy to, just, let your ego run wild and think that your way is the only way.
Yeah. How do you navigate that?
Well, it's not easy. In Change What's Normal, I ended each of the 58 Sparkinations. I ended each one by saying, "Do your work."
Yeah.
Which I borrowed a little bit from Stephen Pressfield, who wrote that wonderful book called "Do the Work."
Yeah.
And what he's talking about is overcoming the resistance.
Yeah.
And what he says, which I think is magical,
yeah,
that it's easier to do the work than it is to resist doing the work.
Yeah.
And then, so it's the same kind of thing. It's easier for someone to say, "Well, my way is the only way."
Yeah. Yeah.
It's harder to say, "Let's find a way together."
True.
It requires work. It requires a relationship. It requires effort. Sometimes it's painful, etc.
Question for you. Do you feel as though society has lowered the bar to make things easier?
Yes.
Is that a good thing?
As a generalization.
Yes. Is that a good thing in your opinion?
I think it's bad.
Okay, cool.
I was raised with what I would call the work ethic.
Yeah.
And so, if you want something, you have to work for it.
Yeah.
And I think if you want to live your best life, you've got to work for it.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm exactly of the same opinion. And it's interesting to see.
Personal work, though, AJ, that's the point I perhaps should make here. It's personal work.
That's right. It is personal work.
My way will not work for you.
Yes.
And we all have to. There's all these gurus out there saying, take these 7 steps and you'll be a millionaire.
Yeah.
Well, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas my work, and this is probably what differentiates me from most mentors, is that I'm about helping you find your own way.
Yeah.
Because I know my way won't work.
Yeah.
But your way works.
Huge. That is huge.
And so I'm a teacher of principles.
Yep.
And one of them, Sharedview, and it's about helping you to find how you could use that principle. Because here's this old thing. It says, way back, as I say, as old as you can get. The Aborigines probably knew this 60,000 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's old.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The Native American Indians certainly, knew it, because I've read some of those early writings, things like the book by Black Elk, for example. They've known that the shared path is a greater path. It's a harder path.
Yeah.
But it requires you and me taking a principle that's a life principle and learning how to apply it in the way that works for you. Your best way, because no good my way. So I'm a kind of sometimes I say I am a teacher, but I'm not the kind of teacher you might think. All I'm doing is bringing from a lifetime of experience some principles that I've seen, 7 or 8 of them, that if you learn to apply them in your own best way, you can live your best life and you can contribute, to the world. It's not about being perfect. It doesn't mean that you're going to get it right all the time.
Yep.
But as a general rule, it means a better life. And certainly in the workplace, which is where I specialize, particularly in family-owned businesses. And if the corporation's leaders are enlightened, in other words, they're not greedy bastards like most of them, then I'll work with those people too. How ridiculous that a CEO can take home 300 times the average wage of the lowest paid employee. What it used to be was, 20 times or 30 times was at the absolute minimum years ago. And so there's all these greedy bastards out there running the world. Well, I don't want to talk to any of them unless they're prepared to look at a new way.
Yeah.
But there are some folk, family-owned businesses, private-owned businesses, and some corporate people.
Yep.
that know that their way is not the only way, that know that money's not the the thing, that the economics, that the profit's not the thing. I mean, my saying, AJ, is profit is not a reason for being in business. It's a result of being good at business.
Oh, damn straight. And I think that lesson has been forgotten, going back to the Peter Drucker's thing. The purpose of business is to create and keep a customer,
Yeah. And look, Peter Drucker, I think in another conversation we had, we're talking about, I claim people management, that is being dead a very long time ago. But Drucker, the so-called father of management, he was on exactly the same path. People have just forgotten. He said, we need to lead people and manage things was his insight.
Exactly right, and I think that's really interesting. So that's a great opportunity for me to ask you about your let's call it your flavor of leadership. So you specialize in an area called possibility leadership. What does that mean?
Well, I made that up too, but I think it's touching a zeitgeist. Because we've moved from the mechanical kind of world, cause and effect world. We're now in the quantum world.
Yep.
We've been there for quite a while.
Yep.
And I learnt this probably 20 years ago. I learnt about the true science of quantum leaps, which most people think big jump.
Yep.
But in actual fact, the science of quantum leaps says it's not a big jump at all. It's actually a tiny, tiny, small shift. But the thing is, it's a shift from here to there, but it's actually small.
Right.
And so possibility leadership is about looking at what are the shifts, what are these, I call them the small yet significant shifts that we could make that will lead us to a bigger place. But see, what often happens is we have this big, huge goal, Collins called it, the big, hairy, audacious goal. And that's fine.
Yep.
But most people don't achieve it.
Yeah.
Because in my experience, they don't quantum leap.
Yeah.
They don't do small yet significant shifts. So I learned that about 20 years ago, and so it's exploring what's possible. Because according to quantum physicists, we live in a world of infinite possibility.
Yeah, that's true.
It never ends. And so possibility leadership is saying, okay, what's possible? This is where we are, but what would be possible if everyone was being the best version of themselves? And then you get the BHAG. But then the work is to look at those small yet significant shifts. And then you apply a second principle, which is called the aggregation of marginal gains.
Okay.
Which I learned from the British cycling team.
Really?
Wow. They'd never won a race in history, and all of a sudden they're winning all the races.
Yep.
Including the Tour de France. People thought they were on drugs, and there is some, maybe some suspicion, but I haven't found any pure evidence about that. But what I have learned is that they looked at improving everything to do with riding a racing bike, everything possible, the size of the seat, the shape of the seat, what the chain was made of. You imagine every possible thing.
Wow.
And looked to improve each one by 1%, and then they aggregated the gains.
Gotcha.
So I take those two principles.
Yeah.
I help people to see possibility first of all.
Yeah.
And in a world of infinite possibility, you can go anywhere. The imagination knows no limits.
That's so true.
And then you do quantum leaps, and you do what I call a plan on a page. I'm a pioneer, AJ, in plans on a page.
Yeah, I saw that. Talk to me about that.
There's lots of people doing plans on a page, but they become so complicated you can't read the bloody thing. So my plans on a page are still simple.
Yep.
And they're based on the 7 areas of shared view that I think are significant. First of all, knowing exactly where you are, appreciating reality.
Yep.
Number 2, imagining possibility. Number 3, having that underpinned with a real purpose, not some silly, stupid mission statement, but actually a real purpose.
Yeah.
And then it's about strategy. And strategy, most people I think have lost this idea that strategy is actually a very simple thing. Strategic planning is an oxymoron. The strategy and the plan are different. So all these people out doing strategic plans, they never see the light of day after that. They hardly ever get achieved. It's all bullshit. And so what I'm about is helping people to discover what the strategy might be in one single sentence. And then developing an execution plan that's based on quantum leaps and the aggregation of marginal gains. Then
that is huge. That is
then
huge.
it's about measuring progress, which comes from Teresa Ambley's idea, the progress principle.
Yep.
Harvard believed it was the breakthrough idea of the 2010s, and it's this idea of making meaningful progress visible, which I think is
gotcha.
Teresa's really onto it, I think, in that world. And then it's about culture, which
Yeah.
really is about behaviors, which underpins it all. So those 7 things: reality, possibility, purpose, strategy, execution, progress, and culture.
Yeah, wow.
My plans on a page capture all of those, but only ever for 90 days at a time. And what they really are is a conversation focusing tool.
Yeah, of course. Of course. Right? Yes.
So I started developing in my corporate life when I had a lot of people reporting to me where they're all over the place, and I used to get frustrated that we weren't all on the same page.
Yeah.
And so one night, it just came to me that we should be able to get all of our plans on one page. And so I had a go at that. I showed it to my team. They thought it was great, and hence a plan on a page was born.
That's how the best ideas come, eh?
And since then, I've developed it more, and my clients have been obviously very helpful because it's been fine tuned now to where they're very usable things. So possibility leadership is all of that, but in a sentence, it's turning reality into possibility in a series of small yet significant shifts that ends up achieving something that's quite different to where people are now.
Yeah, and that's huge. And I think that approach also serves a lot of organizations, a lot of companies, because I think there's a tendency, because even though I'm in the innovation space, right? So it's very easy to fall, like we talked about before, it's very easy to talk about technological change, and the robots are coming and they're going to take away jobs and all that. But the reality is all we're doing is sparking fear with some great companies, and no one really wants to stay the same. Like, everyone agrees disruption is out there. No one really wants to stay the same, but the leap, and it's not a quantum leap as I've learned today, right? But the thought of change and the thought of, like, how are we going to look, right? No one's actually addressing that on a large scale. It's always about, oh my God, this company did this, they're embracing robots. Another one's embracing AI. We're all going to be in driverless cars soon. So there's a lot of fear and a lot of panic. And what I love about your approach is essentially that 2 things, the quantum leap, and also measuring the little improvements to get the aggregator. And I think that's huge. And it's going to be incredibly valuable too, on a larger scale, since we spoke about before that you're going to be more active on LinkedIn, which I'm very excited about.
One of the things that I find very amusing is the idea of artificial intelligence.
Yes.
Which I understand the wonders that it can do.
Yes.
But it's artificial. Well, you and I aren't artificial. We're real humans. And so what I see, and I'm seeing this in every industry all over the world, machines are taking over the routine, repetitive work.
Yeah.
And thank God.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because who wants to do some of that crap?
Yeah, exactly right. And yeah.
But what's happening on the other side of the coin, so you imagine these 2 circles together again. So the machines are on one side and we humans are on the other. And what we're doing is we're discovering human work that's meaningful for us.
Yeah.
And yet highly valuable for someone else. And so you put those 2 things together, and you have the organization of the 21st century.
Yeah.
Not this or that, but both.
Exactly. Yeah.
Both humans and machines. And there's a great, I don't know whether you've come across Gerd Leonhard's work, the Swiss guy, who he does a lot of work in this space.
Right.
And we actually spoke at a conference together in Germany a number of years ago, and he sparked this idea in me that humans and machines actually can coexist. I call it the harmony, the relationship harmony point between things. And humans and machines is a great example. So they're not hanging out here. They're actually together.
Yeah.
And that's the new world of work. Now, in possibility leadership, when you look at that theory, you can do 3 things. So I say possibility leadership is 3 things. It's people leadership.
Yep.
Number 1.
Yep.
Number 2, it's process management. And processes include policies, procedures, practices, systems, structures. That's all the new management, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And what underpins that is this idea of progress.
Yeah, right.
Making meaningful work visible.
Yeah, and that's huge.
Now, you put those three together, and what you end up with is people who feel valued, people who live values, and people who deliver value.
Yeah.
And that, to me, is the new world of work. That's what a remarkable workplace looks like.
Yeah.
And that's what I do. I help people who are willing to go on the journey we've been talking about to build the workplaces that are remarkable.
Yeah, and that's huge, mate. That's huge. So I'm very excited you're going to be active on LinkedIn, and people can follow you on Twitter. And I'll put all the links to your things there. Before we head off, mate, I want to ask you, you've been a speaker for a very long time, and you're well respected in our industry, in my circles. How have you seen the speaking industry evolve over the last X years that you've been? Has it changed? Has it evolved? Has it stayed the same? What's your opinion?
Look, I haven't really question without notice, but what comes to my mind is that shallow speakers come and go. Speakers of substance stay.
I love that. I love that.
And so I survived for, a very long time, as did a lot of my colleagues, and I'm sure you'll be one of these people.
Yeah, wow.
Because we focused on the audience.
Yep.
And giving them substance.
Yep.
we weren't this shallow stuff. People win a gold medal and think they're all of a sudden a speaking legend. And so, they're gone in 2 years.
Yeah.
Whereas people that have been around, I think I stopped counting after 2,500 presentations. I stopped counting. And most of those were sort of the workshop things, but I did something like 700 keynotes over 25 years or so.
Yeah.
And first of all, it's about them. You've got to engage with the audience, whether it's 5 people or 5,000 people.
Yeah. And
you've got to share stories with them that they feel themselves in.
Yep.
And you've got to give them substance.
Yeah.
If you want to, survive.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I think that's so important.
Be continually, I've loved books my entire life.
Yeah.
So I read anything that I can get my hands on, really. I'm particularly interested in philosophy and business things, but I have a passion for finding out.
Yeah.
So if someone says, "Well, this is white," I want to see if it could be black. I was born this way.
Yeah.
But it's helped me keep being on the edge of things. And you got to work hard to give people substance.
Yeah.
And
that's huge.
I see a lot around, and I think that's not substance.
Yeah. Great minds.
That's trying to sell something, and I've got nothing to sell.
Yeah.
Nothing at all. What I've got is some wisdom.
Yeah.
That through a series of conversations.
Yeah.
Can be helpful for you to find your best way to apply principles that have been around forever.
Yeah, and that is huge, mate. That is absolutely huge. So last question on our session here today. You have got 5 million baseball caps behind you. What's the story with them?
Well, one of the great things about giving talks was that, it led me to lots of different places all around the world. And part of it was sort of personal travel and part of it was work. But yeah, I've basically got a cap for pretty much every city I've been to, and they're not all there. And I decided, I should, because when I look at each of the caps, there's a memory.
Yeah.
And this is the great thing that I think, my friend who passed in 2011, for example, he's long gone, but the memories aren't gone.
Yeah, and that's huge. That's absolutely huge. Wow.
And so when I look at the caps, I remember, which, triggers often an idea, because I come here every day. It's in my office, I'm always surrounded by all those memories.
Yeah.
A lot of very funny things, a lot of great things, a lot of things, my wife and I have been fortunate. We've seen a bit of the world.
Yeah.
And so, they're good memories, but they help me to share the stories, because one of the things, and this is why storytelling is so popular now. You know, stories have been the fabric of culture since the beginning of time.
Yeah, wow. That's so true, isn't it?
And so now what we're seeing is it's almost an avalanche of stories. And that's, I mentioned in an earlier conversation, I'm going to be talking to Bernadette Jiwa sometime this year about, because she's the guru in story skills, right?
She's amazing, yeah.
And I've got a lot of time for her wonderful books and her whole approach. So her and I are going to have a conversation about that sometime this year.
Awesome.
But that's really at the heart of all of this. Everything we've talked about, it comes down to, what is your story?
Yep.
What's my story?
Yeah.
What's the story of everyone that we relate with, and how can we help each other to live a better story?
That's amazing. That's a beautiful, beautiful look at it. All right, mate, I might leave it there. Thank you so much. I'll get you to turn off the recording. Oh, before we go, where can people get your brilliance? How can people sample more of your brilliance online?
Well, when we post this on YouTube, we'll put in some links.
Great. That's awesome. I love that. Love that. And you're on Twitter and you're on LinkedIn. I'll put in all the links as well. So
we'll put those links. So I'll just stop the record for now, and then you and I will continue. But I'll just.
Sounds good. All right. Take care. Mate.